my time. Well, good afternoon or good morning or good night, depending on where you are. It is time for yet another installment of CRM Convos. Today, we are fortunate, very fortunate, to have the CRM guru himself, Mr. Bob Stutz, joining us again for, well, whatever it is we wind up talking about, which I expect is going to range pretty far. Bob has worked everywhere, as far as I know. I don't even have the list in front of me, but if something has happened in CRM in the past 20 or 25 years, Bob's been near it. So how are you doing today, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well,
it's and informative.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Now, my ebullient introduction was what it was, but if you would care to narrow it down a little bit more for the people who, the 5 people in our industry who don't know everything about you.
Sybase, Siebel, SAP, Microsoft, HP, SAP, and Salesforce, and retirement.
Bravo retirement.
Yeah, bravo Zulu to the last one. Yeah. Whereas I have doubts fully believing that.
I'm trying.
Well, that's...
And before that career, the high tech career, I had 22 years in the military.
So quite a moving and moved life.
Yeah.
Military is probably something we do not dig too deep into it, although well, there are current incidents which we probably like to avoid. But yeah, it's called CRM-Konvos and not military convos for a reason.
Yeah.
But at least I know something about CRM.
Maybe combined, we know a third of what Bob has forgotten about CRM. Maybe. But let's talk about what is going right in the industry right now, because we can drag about the whole day about what's not going right. But let's start on a positive note.
No, I think what's going right for the first time is I think everybody's embracing the concept of machine learning, AI. I think it's great that there's such a concentrated effort on it. There has been efforts in the past, but the problem was the technology wasn't like it is today. And so those efforts sort of died off after a while. I mean, some of it not. Look, AI is a big field, right? There's lots of different moving pieces to AI. Some of it is used pretty frequently, like fuzzy logic, right? Used all over the place in applications today, right? But now with generative AI and I think true machine-based automation, I think everybody's focused on the right things, just not sure it's the right way that people are focused.
Mm-hmm. Why not sure about the right way? What should the focus be?
I think generative AI is great, and I think generative AI will help people to do jobs better. But I still look at every CRM system, and the part that I don't see is trying to truly automate those systems. Today, those systems they're not smart applications. And let's be clear, generative AI doesn't make them smart applications at the end of the day. What generative AI does is it helps them, it helps the user to be a little smarter about what they're doing at the end of the day. But it doesn't make the application smarter. True AI, machine-based automation, I don't think is being worked on by anybody today. Like, our applications are still very dumb at the end of the day. It takes a user to make the application smart. Right? And that's what you see. People who really know how to use the software and manipulate the software, they can get whatever they want out of it and make it work. But having true automated based systems that are intelligent, that can make smart decisions on their own, that's where the next trend really needs to be, because then it makes every user a smart user at the end of the day.
Do those systems need users?
Ultimately, they still need users at the end of the day. Now, some pieces may not, right? Depending on how smart the machine can get. Eventually at some juncture, those machines become smart enough they can make the right decisions. But let's be clear, that takes a long time, right? Even in robotics, it's taken a long time, right, for robotics to be perfected the way it is today, right? So it's no different, right, with applications. True automation is going to take quite a long time to get to where it's effective, efficient, reliable, predictable, right? Those are the things that I think, you're going to have to solve, right? And the only way you can solve that is by feeding mass amounts of data and situations into those machines to get them that way. And I think that's probably the hardest part, is where does the data come from?
Where are systems? I mean, I can think of a bunch of systems that are kind of automated or on the way there. Too many people, for example, already trust in their car guiding them without many accidents or from A to B.
Yeah, it's true, right? So if you look at automotive, a good example is in the automotive space, right? Self-driving cars, right? I was in San Francisco a few weeks back, and I was shocked at the self-driving taxis in San Francisco. Never saw that before.
I haven't had a chance to yet.
And I wouldn't get in one because I probably at this juncture in my life don't trust them, But the fact that the city actually has them, and they operate and they run and they work. I mean, I think in the automotive space, they've made great advances in automation, right?
Yeah.
But in software, I think we still are way behind in that regard. Because if you think about it, if you really want to do that, you almost have to start with a new platform. You can't take what you currently have and try to make it into that. I don't think it's possible at the end of the day. I think it would take longer to do that than it would to really rethink and rebuild from the ground up and start fresh. Something that's truly AI first, truly mobile first, right? Because it doesn't exist today.
I wonder what that would look like.
It's a good question.
Skynet.
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of, there's always been speculation about, the whole concept of when you think about machine learning and fluid software and the two of them becoming one, right? Having dynamic UIs that are self-generated based on the data, right? I mean, we're not far from that. I actually believe in a couple of years we'll see that, where even on your mobile phone, you won't have a static UI. You'll have a dynamic UI that can change based on what you need to see and what you want to see at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. It's coming. We're just not there yet.
How would the role of a user change with that type of system?
I think the user, first of all, I think the user becomes much smarter because they don't have to. Today, all these systems are pull systems. You have to pull from it, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why I always say, if you're a super user and a smart user, you can get anything out of these systems, but you have to know how to do that. But in the future, I think it'll all be about it. Everything's going to get pushed, right? The user has an identity. That identity triggers the flow of information, right? And that flow can come from numerous things. It could come from voice, right? We have some of that today with like Siri and Copilot and all these other things. The 20 different Copilots that are out there nowadays, right? Because everybody has a Copilot.
Everybody has one, yeah.
Yeah. I think Microsoft's on their third one now because they actually had one back in 2016. They had a Copilot that actually was that did work. But then it died. They never really moved it forward. And
why not?
And so I think, they used to have this beautiful thing they built that was sitting on top of Office. That
Clippy, yep.
Yep. No, not Clippy. No. And actually, it was very much a Copilot type of thing. But it never moved forward. They had it around for a while and then it disappeared. Mm-hmm. And now it's up again.
Why did they pause it?
I don't. So look, it's like everything else. Like Microsoft, you look back at their history, has always been ahead of the market. They always knew where things were going. They were just always too early to the market. I mean, everything from the tablet, right? Who developed the first tablet? It was actually Microsoft, long before Apple had the tablet.
Software-wise?
Yeah, even software-wise, if you look at things, right?
Okay, I usually look at them as a second mover who waits till they can knock someone on their head and then take over.
OneDrive. Right?
Yeah.
Microsoft OneDrive was around a decade before iCloud came around. It was something Microsoft built and then put it in the closet.
Okay.
And then pulled it out after iCloud came out. But they had the concept years before. Look at the whole thing about passport identity of moving between sites freely. Microsoft had that back in the late 90s. They had what was known as passport.
Yeah.
But the world wasn't ready for it yet. Now you have 20 different companies building a single sign-on identifier, that you can use to move around between different sites, right? So I do think that they've always been ahead, but they've never hit the market when they needed to hit the market.
Okay.
And then you have this case where the AI technology, machine learning was moving at a fast pace, right? None of the software companies were moving at that pace. They all got blindsided by ChatGPT. And then they were forced, right? So the new mantra is everything has to be generative AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it took all of us by surprise.
And let's be clear, how long is it going to take them to get to a truly productive state functioning product that uses generative AI? It's going to take a while, right? I mean, most of the companies they've like Salesforce had Dreamforce and they went big with some of the stuff they're doing, all available next year.
Mm-hmm. It's still the case. It's all if you attend vendor
events, right? Microsoft,
now, they say next year.
I think same thing. Some little bits and pieces there, but it's coming, right? It's going to take time for that stuff. I think the industry, was taken by surprise, which you have to wonder why. Why did that happen, right? I mean, these guys weren't secretive about what they've been working on, like all these AI companies that are building this stuff, right? They've been out there.
They weren't the only ones,
They weren't the only ones, right? And so I do think, now it's catch up in the industry. But what does it really mean, right? It means they're going to build plugins to help their existing platform, existing applications. It's not new. It's not going to be, excuse me.
It's okay.
It's not going to be game-changing stuff, I don't think. I don't think we're going to see that. Not for quite a while.
So we'll see extensions to what exists now as opposed to something truly new. What will it take to get that truly new thing out there?
It either has to be a big player who's committed to building that next generation, which is always dangerous. Or it's going to have to be a startup that takes on the task of building the next generation CRM, similar to what Salesforce did to the players that were in the space at the time, like Siebel, right? It was total disruption to the market.
Now, can a big player looking at share market pressures do that at all? Because I mean, what that would mean is sacrificing the stock valuation, and I don't see any vendor, any investor who cheers at that prospect.
No, but if you have a big vendor who has deep pockets, they can start almost like their own spin-off company to do it.
Okay, so there are not that many companies that come to mind. So there's Microsoft that are already sort of in that market. Then there's Apple, which is not. Maybe Amazon.
Not yet.
Yeah,
I think you have to be careful about the players who aren't in the space today.
Google,
who don't have legacy that they have to worry about. Right?
They're not beholden to anything in the
They're
past.
not beholden to anybody or any customer, right? Yeah. They can, you have the AWSs of the world, the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world. You have, there are companies out there that
have the AI
that could, right? I mean, I really think it's a combination of things, right? I think it's a combination of it's going to be AI. I do think, virtual reality can play a very big part in modern day applications. You see it already in some things, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen BMW has this app that you put on your phone. If you want a new car, you can go look at their cars and then you can see the car displayed in your living room, right? Look, that stuff is, if you think about how that could be used, right? Service technicians out on a job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts of uses, but you'd have to build a system that is geared to be able to do that from the beginning, right?
Mhm.
It can't be just another plug-in to one of the existing systems. Like, these systems are all getting old, you know,
Desperately old.
desperately old, right? I mean, look, Salesforce is, is heading on the 25-year mark here. You've got, even Zoho. Zoho is probably hitting 20 plus years now.
Yeah.
You got Sugar that's been around for 25 plus years. So all these systems are sort of running their course here. They've reached their maturity stage, right? And we all know what happens in software when you hit that maturity stage. There's nowhere to go but down.
Yeah.
Because you can't keep going back up. You start to go down, right?
Yeah, which is the big scramble right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think, the vendor who really decides they want to be the long-term leader will bite the bullet and figure out how to do that. And, and it's something that I think, SAP's tried to do it with the ERP. I think with S4, they've tried, with S4 HANA Cloud, they've tried to do that. I think they're seeing success. It wasn't as fast as they thought it would be, but it's working for them at the end of the day. And I think, a vendor, if they really care about long-term longevity, especially in this space, you almost have to start thinking about that, right? You have to start thinking about, how am I going to be the leader, in 5 years, right? Because sooner or later, by the way, and I'll just throw one other thing out there, I actually believe, and I could be absolutely wrong, I'm usually not, but I do believe that.
Well, let's check in 5 years.
I think what you're going to start seeing, because of where the technology is, where the development capabilities are going, I think companies will start to build their own stuff again. I think we'll start to see a resurgence of people moving away from vendor-based software and moving back to to building their own again. I do think that is. I think a lot of companies are at a point where the amount of money they spend on vendors for software is outrageous.
I mean, it has two reasons, right? So the vendors are very good at harvesting a good part of the value that they are creating or promising to create. So it ends up directly at the vendor. And the other part is the emergence of no-code, automated no-code even.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I wouldn't dare contradicting that vision.
Yeah.
I do think with the, and if you look at the capabilities of AI and being able to generate applications in the future, I do think as time progresses, companies will realize that their own investment in AI could lead them to a ton of savings and being able to generate applications that work for them at the end of the day. Yeah. Not something they have to take and then make it work for them at the end of the day.
Doesn't that also spell doom for OpenAI?
I think in some ways it will at some juncture, But look, it's still all new now, right? It's people are starting to try. I think people are trying to grapple with, how do I move forward with this stuff, right? How do I truly get the benefit out of this? I mean, look, we all play around with it, and and I find it to be fascinating. Actually, I think it's even when I look at the benefits from, like, if I just think about software development, forget all the other stuff, right? Like if I was a VC or an investment house and I had a lot of portfolio companies, I would feed all that code into a machine, and then I would generate new products based off of that code, right? That, you think about the innovation you could have, right? As the machines get smarter, right?
Mhm.
Being able to take bits and pieces from other and generate new software out of that, right? New products, right? I mean, if you think about product innovation, right?
Mhm.
I think the winners in this whole thing will be truly creative people who know how to use the machine to drive innovation at the end of the day.
Yesterday, I had an interesting conversation with a cybersecurity expert. He went into a similar direction, but what he also said is that it's far easier to generate, so to create malicious applications than, well, societal or company helpful applications. How would you
It's
stand to
always been easier to break things than to build them.
that? So what needs to happen to minimize that risk?
I think, look, I think the
of
security
CRM.
risk is always a big one, right? Especially in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
But I think, people are smarter now than they were before.
Mhm.
I think if you're going to build, look, let's be clear, right? A lot of applications over the years were built with, I would say, minimum security knowledge.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree.
Security.
I think it's only been the last
10.
6-7 years
Yeah.
that there's been an intense focus, really intense focus on safeguarding data that resides in applications, right? Not that it wasn't there before, but I think you didn't have the people, you didn't have the specialty that you have today,
Mhm.
right? And I think now with machine learning and AI, people are going to have to really think about that from the very beginning, right?
Mhm.
You don't want people making the mistake like Samsung made with ChatGPT, right?
Mhm.
You guys know about that one where they fed their, their
Fed that
product.
code into. Yeah.
They fed all their product stuff into a public domain instance.
Yeah, and they haven't been the only ones. Yeah.
And they're not the only ones, right? There's others that have apparently done the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, look, I think nowadays when you build something, you have to think security first, right? In the old days, you found cool stuff you wanted to build and you built it, and security was always the afterthought,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty cool what I built. Now I got to figure out how I'm going to secure it.
Yeah.
Right. Versus I think the design paradigm has to change, right? You have to think about that security right up front, right? About how you're going to secure data, how you're going to, and I think with machine learning, it's even more important, right? How are you going to safeguard, right?
Mhm.
I read this fascinating thing about, hallucination and AI, and actually I find it very intriguing, actually, that because that's part of the ingenious part, right? Because the machine can take that data and think about it in ways that we don't think about it, and come up with stuff that's very different than what you would expect, right? So how do you factor that in at the end of the day, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So there's all these things you got to think about, right? And it's also other things too, right? Like bias, right? You have to be pretty careful with the bias stuff, right? It's another issue that I think people are still grappling with, right?
We'll continue to,
and we'll continue to, right?
Because your bias is different from mine, right?
That's right.
And both of us will say, well, the system is biased and differently biased.
Yeah,
it's a human issue as opposed to a technological one.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things that people have to think about when they start building new things, right? They're going to have to really think about that from day one versus, I mean, look at all the applications that were built and nobody thought about that stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody ever thought about any of that stuff. But could you build bias into an application? Absolutely, you could at the end of the day, right? The assumptions that you make when you build stuff and you program those assumptions in, right?
Well, by the way, it looks like Ralph can at least attend.
Good. Hello, Ralph.
Instead of host it.
Go, Ralph.
What the minimum bias or no bias? Michael Wu basically says, or by the way says, there is no possibility to achieve something like no bias. Just doesn't work.
I agree.
Yeah, so I agree too. So because, as said, our biases are already different, right?
Because look, where does the data come from? It comes from humans.
Yeah, and this is one thing, and the other thing is what is truth.
And look, humans are biased.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own biases, right?
Yeah. So that's, well, it's a global optimization that somehow needs to happen.
But I mean, look, in the CRM space, I would say the one vendor who I think could do it is Salesforce. They've done it once, and they could do it again. But they really have to rethink, right? What the next generation of software is going to look like, right?
Are they in a position to do it? Considering that their current focus is away from growth to
profitability. But I mean, look, their numbers are still very good, right? You look at their last earnings.
Well, from an investor point of view, I get shiny eyes. But
but look, I mean, if investors want that money to keep coming in, the company's got to change, right? That was the one mistake Siebel made. Didn't change fast enough. I mean, we were in the process towards the end of trying to build the next generation, but it wasn't fast enough.
Okay.
And when Salesforce came on, there was, I mean, look, it wasn't that Salesforce was better. But Salesforce came with a totally new paradigm around CRM, right? Which was in the cloud, use your credit card, sign up, right? It was a new, modern, colorful UX that was a little different than the the normal, old style UXs that were out there, right? And so, look, they were able to take the industry. It took a while, right? It didn't happen overnight.
No.
It literally took them, I think, till 2010, 2011 before they really started to take off, right? They hit that 1 million user mark, and then, and then it just blossomed from there, right?
Until then they got underestimated.
Yeah.
Well, checking back a little earlier, you said something about, well, basically automation first, and that SAP for S4 is seemingly on a good track there. Slower than they may expect or not. Do you think?
I think, yeah, but I think they still have a lot of work, right? I think, right? But if you think about the enormity of what they have in ERP, I mean, let's just compare. There is no comparison between an ERP system and a CRM system at the end of the day, right? They're two very different beasts, right? But if you think about the heavy lifting that an ERP system has to do, right? When you start looking at everything, right? You know, production systems, manufacturing, right? You go down the whole scope of stuff, right? You know, recipe management, right? Supply chain, right? I mean, this is a huge system at the end of the day, right? Shifting something like that cannot happen overnight, takes time, right? And I think what they've done is they've done a very good job of that shift, right? I mean, I always thought at some juncture, some startup would come along and disrupt that whole market, but it's never happened. I mean, you have some players in the space who are probably a little more agile. But, you know, I don't see anybody in this space disrupting that business at the end of the day.
No. What would it take to transfer that? Sorry, Marshall, but what would it take to transfer that idea, approach to the CRM world or CX world? Take your choice in terms.
I'm not sure you can. And let me explain why. The reason it's a little different is those ERP systems. I mean, look, let's be clear. You could take a CRM system, swap it in and out, and nobody cares. You can't do that with an ERP system. You would totally disrupt your entire business if you did that, right? Because that is the heart and soul of your system of your company, right? It controls everything, right? With a CRM system, I mean, look, there's companies today who still run efficiently. They use an ERP system in the back end, but they run on freaking spreadsheets in the front office, right?
Yeah.
There's companies today who still run CRM in Outlook, you know?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's possible, right? Depending on what you need to do and what stuff you need to do, right? You could do it, right? So it's a little harder to sort of do that. I don't think you could do the same thing like customers have a different expectation on the front office versus the back office. Nobody expects the back office to modernize and shift overnight. But I do believe customers expect that on the front office because the business changes. How you do business in the front changes more rapidly than how you do business in the back, right? And you have to be able to shift that very rapidly, right? And CRM systems today just aren't designed for that, right? They're, you know, I mean, it takes time to implement major changes in a CRM system, right? But I think customers want a very flexible framework. They want a framework that allows them to do that kind of stuff quick, fast, right? Yeah. And look, in some cases you have it with some of these systems. You do have, you know, the whole low code, no code thing was a great addition, right? Because it allows to do things quick, fast. But I think for CRM, I think customers are going to expect more. They're going to expect rapid change. They're going to expect to, you know, see the vendors actually move much faster now that the technology is shifting. Because otherwise they're going to say to themselves, look, I can do this myself now. I don't need you to do this. I can, you know, or I'll just use you for what you are right now. And everything else I'm just going to wrap around you. And what they become is they become, you know, nothing more than basically the system of record, and all the new modern apps get thrown on top of them.
Marshall, now before I run over you again.
I was going to say, well, with that in mind, what will it take for the incumbents to do something truly different? And yes, I did just read that directly off the cheat sheet, but I think it fits here.
Yeah, I think they have to rethink what they're doing. I think they have to realize that what they have today is not going to sustain them into the next generation. And it takes a lot of guts to do that. It's not easy, right?
No.
And you almost have to bring in new people to do it.
People with a new perspective.
With a very new perspective. So the one mistake that I will say that Siebel made is when we decided. Yeah, well, the big one was when we decided to build the next generation. We used the same people who built the first generation. And I think that doesn't work.
Okay, so he was probably not alone with that mistake.
No, but it was a major one for us.
Yeah.
And not that the people who were doing it were, they were top of amazing engineers. But they already had preconceived notions because of what they had built the first time around. I think you have to bring in new people who are not biased because they've built part of the system, or it's almost better to bring in people who can think totally different about this space, right? I mean, now that I've been retired for a while, it'll be 2 years in December.
So you are a new person.
I do think about it differently. I look back and I go, shit, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I think about that back then? Right? Could have done something totally radically different. Right? But it's hard when you're in there and working in that stuff every single day. It gets a little more, it gets difficult to rethink, right? And to take on a whole different mindset about what should really be built at the end of the day, right?
But doesn't this group then also need to be totally compartmentalized from the rest of the gang?
I think you do. I think you need to go off into find a place out in the middle of nowhere with, to totally rethink this stuff, right? And look, the total blending of, look, we're trying to bring things together today, right? In different ways, because we didn't think about it as one when it was built. So an example is, why did we have to come up with the concept of a CDP? Well, because we realized that in order to provide seamless experiences, you sort of have to have some way to connect all those things together, right?
Well, this cloudification didn't help, yeah.
That's because and look, the reality was the cloud was originally supposed to do that, but the cloud became siloed, right? So clouds themselves became silos. And so now what did we have to do? We had to come up with a concept to say, hey, now we got to bring this stuff together in a real-time way so that all these different pieces are looking at the same customer in the same way and can do things in real time, which we don't have yet. Nobody has real time yet, in a way that gives this amazing customer experience, right? Everything is still a silo in CRM. Sales, marketing, service, commerce, right? They're still silos.
Right.
The next generation you have to think about how do you build it so it's one beating heart at the end of the day, right? Not multiple beating hearts, but one beating heart. That heart is feeding all those things in the right way. That's what needs to come next, right? That's going to be hard, by the way. It's going to be very hard.
Then you need to figure out a pricing model for it.
Oh, yeah, that's the other problem, which is how do you price something like that?
It's probably even harder.
It isn't going to be a subscription model. It's not going to be, a perpetual license model. It's got to be a new type of model that, usage-based, true usage-based model could be. I'm a firm believer in pay for what you consume at the end of the day. Shouldn't have to pay for a bunch of stuff that I don't use.
That's fair.
Which, by the way, is what happens today, right?
Yeah.
With subscription models. You buy an application, you may only use that application may have 50 views. But out of those 50 views, you only use 2.
Which is one of the reasons for the necessity of CDPs, by the way.
Yes. So that people can build other applications on top of the CDP to bypass their CRM systems, which is what will ultimately happen.
So now let's get back to this SAP example. I'm quite intrigued by that. Maybe just because of this tattoo that I'm hiding here. Looking at what you said earlier, so on S4, they are probably on the right way. Let's assume they are on the right way. They often are. So, and you say it's hard to transfer that to the CRM world. On the other hand, we have now, let's get a plethora of buzzwords. We have composability of apps. We have low code, no code. We have even intelligent no code, meanwhile, so that can create my apps. I have process mining that tells me where I should do something or should change something. Isn't that a possible combination?
It is a combination, but it's a complex combination.
Yeah.
The complexity. You just add in more complexity to what exists in a system, right? Look, I'm a huge fan of process mining and all this stuff, right? But let's not forget the complexity that adds into a system at the end of the day.
Yeah,
right?
But the complexity needs to be somewhere. Either I have it as a person in front of.
Why does it need to be somewhere? Why do we need to have complexity in dumb applications? I can understand complexity in smart applications, but I don't understand complexity in dumb applications, right? Because there is a big difference, right? Complexity is important, but having complexity in the right place and complexity that is run by a machine that it makes itself smarter and smarter, the more interactions, the more transactions it does, is one thing. But complexity that has to be manually controlled by a person, by humans, has to constantly be tweaked, right? Let's be clear. If you look at things like workflows today, constantly have to be tweaked, constantly have to be changed, right? This is all manual at the end of the day. Even process mining, right, is a lot of manual activity, right? It's a lot of services-based activity at the end of the day. Why do we need that complexity? Because you could build it in a way where you don't have that complexity, where that complexity is built in the machine from the start. The machine is the one driving that, right?
I'd now say this is because of the revenue models.
Well, sure it is, right? Because, look, you build software, then you need an integrator to put the goddamn thing in, which costs you an arm and a leg, right? Right. Then you got to add other things. So let's be clear, right? You take a simple CRM system today, an enterprise customer. let's just say he buys a CRM system. He buys Salesforce. He pays X for that Salesforce system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Salesforce doesn't do everything the way a company needs it to do. Correct? So, right. So you talk to any customer, they'll tell you how many things they have attached to that Salesforce system, right? They have sales enablement systems, revenue. They have revenue intelligence plugins. They have, right. They have opportunity management plugins. They have forecast plugins. They have, right. It becomes this huge complexity, right? Because those systems are not smart. And when those systems were built, they had no propensity to take on new things, right? Because they were built in a way. So that's why you have all these companies who thrive, right? Who are building those things that customers need, right? I mean, God, there's no shortage of these plugins, right? All you got to do is go to App Exchange and look at the number of plugins on App Exchange, right? It's huge. Why is that there? Because the systems can't do what they need to do to really make customers successful. You have to add all these different things in there, right? Salesforce has lots of partners, right? SAP has lots of partners. Microsoft has lots of partners, right? And they're all building little things to add on to this, right? And that's why, you know, like if you start from scratch again and you rethink about how software has to work in an environment. Think about how new things have to be able to attach into that environment. I think what you would find is a very different software at the end of the day. A smarter software has to be smarter, right? It's not smart today. It's dumb. Look, I'm sorry, but I can't think of a single smart application that's out there today.
I'm just trying to envision a software that figures what people wants to do and then generates that thing.
I think at some juncture we'll be able to do that based on behavioral, right? I think that is, and based on what you do, what your role is, what your responsibilities are, right?
Wouldn't process mining be part of that tool? Adding complexity again?
Yeah, it will.
Data needs to come from somewhere.
The data needs to come from somewhere, right? But that's the first issue, right? You have to start thinking about how you restructure data, right? Look, there's a lot of garbage data in an enterprise that has no value, right? And then there's very valuable data that never gets utilized because it sits in a silo somewhere. And, you know, that data is never incorporated into a data that allow a consolidated data, right? Which is what the hope was of, I mean, okay, let's be clear. CDP wasn't the first piece in that. There's been a long lines of things that have, you know, you had, you know, operational data stores, you had, right? I mean, there's no shortage of pieces that were conceived to try to solve this problem, right? Master data management, right? I mean, there's all sorts of things that were conceived to solve this problem, right? But data in itself, you almost have to think about, what does data of the future look like? What's the important data that I really need in the future to do Salesforce automation, right? What is the data I really need to be able to do to sell products? What is the data I really, right? You have to really start thinking about that all over again, right? Because the data you currently have is probably not the data you want in a new system. You have to think about what data is important to collect, right? I mean, there's so much data collected that very little of it is actually used in making decisions at the end of the day. Because companies themselves have problems trying to bring their own data together to use it in a way that can make better decisions, right? And I do think it's about, at some juncture, we've got to get to a point where decisions become automated, right? Not that it replaces humans, because that's not what I'm talking about, right? But there's a lot of decisions that can be made that you don't need a human to make in a CRM system. If you had a smart CRM system, the system could make those decisions itself by constantly going through data, right? Constantly, right? I mean, it is possible, right? The technology is there now to do this, right? But you really do have to put the effort into it to do it. You have to think differently.
So this is probably the answer to what Ralph asked. The differentiator is looking at the right data and creating/preparing the right data.
That's right. And that's not an easy task. Because in order for that machine to be smart, it has to have the right data sets.
Yeah. And to figure these right data sets, it needs to have smart people before who think
different. Need very smart human beings to be able to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
And do we need to? Should those smart people come from this industry, or where do we need to look?
I don't think it is people from the industry. I think it's people who can see the big picture, right? Who can look beyond 3-letter acronyms and look at sort of a big picture of how things come together, right? And then figuring out how do you build based upon those types of concepts, right? Like, it is possible, right? I mean, look, cars. To your example of the automotive industry, self-driving cars. Well, before they could actually have a self-driving car, they had to do a lot of programming about what good driving was, right? There's a lot of assumptions built into that, right? What data do they collect as you drive, right?
More than we probably like to think of.
Yeah.
Stuff that we probably don't even think about, right?
Yeah.
So you have to think about how does that happen, right? A lot of these people who built these systems did not come from the automotive industry, right? So I do think that you need people from all different places to figure out this data problem, right? And it is a data problem. We have a huge data problem. We have a lot of data. We have garbage data. We have data that, I mean, look, just think about it. I mean, look, I've been a customer of the same bank for 40 years. 40 years. I've been the customer of the same bank. I've done everything in my life with this bank. And here I am into a 40-year relationship, and they still don't know who the fuck I am. Seriously.
Yeah. Gotta love those banks, man.
Yeah.
And you just have to wonder, right? It doesn't need to be like that, right? The bank actually loses business from me because they don't know me at the end of the day after all these years, right? And that, I think, if you think about that, right, even a simple bank scenario, why is it that banks still don't know their own customers today? Why do they send me offers that I already have? Another one is I'm like a lifetime ambassador with Marriott. They still send me things saying sign up for Marriott Bonvoy.
Oh,
right. Dumb systems. There's no intelligence in these systems at the end of the day, right?
artificial or organic.
Or organic. But, it doesn't have to be like that, because I do believe, look, the technology is there today. You look at the things that are being done in the technological advances in computing itself are amazing, right? And now you have to wonder, like, why do we still have all these dumb applications? And I've been responsible for building a lot of these dumb applications. So
Well, you listed the gamut of the industry before, yeah.
I look at myself and go, God, what was I thinking, right? But now, you take a step back and you think about it and you go, just like SFA, just think about SFA. Very simple, right? From getting leads, going from, qualifying a lead, going to an opportunity, taking it through the funnel, right? Everything should be automated. Everything. You shouldn't have to think about that process, right? Machines are smart enough to do that, right? I'm telling you, I can tell you for a fact, all companies, pipeline management is still a huge issue, but it could be automated. A machine is smart enough to learn what it takes. What is an opportunity that's never going to go forward? So kill it now, get it out of my pipeline so I have a more accurate forecast at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. You can go down the whole set of processes. Why is it they're still manual today, right? They shouldn't be manual. They should be automated, and we've not built smart applications. We've built dumb applications that take smart people to figure out how to get the best out of them. And it should be the other way around. We should have smart applications that help people to be better at their jobs at the end of the day. And more effective, more efficient, drive higher productivity, right?
Now that we finally got you into a rage, which is really good. Unluckily, our hour is over, and even though you are claiming to be in retirement, an hour is an hour.
So you still have to respect your time.
Yes. I have one closing question, which is, well, do you see any chance at all to not accomplish this via a loon shot? Means putting this group of people aside.
So an evolutionary approach versus a revolutionary approach.
Yeah, or something in between,
My personal feeling is no. What I do believe will happen is lots of vendors will try to take that more evolutionary approach, which could work. But I personally believe the vendors who take the evolutionary approach will at some juncture be disrupted by the startup who takes the fresh approach, who doesn't bring the baggage with them. Because every time you try to do an evolutionary approach, you still carry a lot of baggage. It's like being in a marriage, getting divorced, you go to a new marriage, but you still carry a lot of baggage with you at the end of the day. Yeah. Doesn't change, right? That's life, right? That's the way it is. So I don't see how you can effectively do that sort of evolutionary approach.
Okay, still you said that SAP with S4 is on the right way. Yes,
but remember, SAP had dominance for decades.
Yeah.
In a space. Their customers weren't ready to rip and replace overnight. because those business processes have been around for as long as companies have been around, right? It's not going to change overnight. In that back office, I think you can do an evolutionary approach as long as you're smart and you do it fast enough and you do it. I mean, and that's what they've sort of done, right? They've, you know, if you look at the evolution from, you know, R2, R3, you know, ECC6, going to S4, then S4 HANA Cloud, right? And really revamping stuff, rebuilding stuff, right? Going to a composite-based architecture as they're going, right? The changes were manageable by customers to take that on, right? And I think in the front office space, though, it's different because, look, let's be clear, some stuff changes very rapidly, right? How you interact with customers, the experience you have to provide, right? All that stuff is very different in the front office, right? And I think I think in some ways, I remember this really clearly once from a customer who said, "You guys build the best software in the world." I won't tell you which company it was with. It was actually Siebel. But he said, out of the box, you guys built 350 views, and I only need 20 to run my business. You gave me too much. You know, I have to spend more time turning shit off than I do turning stuff on. Right. And that's where I think the rebuilding from scratch, you have to rethink these things, because I think sometimes we overbuilt in some ways, built way too many things. Right. And there was reasons back then, I think, because we didn't have, like, you know, you didn't have low code, no code. Right. You didn't have things where customers could build it simply themselves to add on. Right. But I think now in this day and age, even I think most of the players in the space today still overbuild. They still have way too many things that, you know, customers spend more time trying to figure out what to turn off than what to use at the end of the day. Yeah. So for me, I think the revolutionary approach is the only way to go. If you're going to disrupt this industry, you've got to take that approach. You know, besides, if you take the evolutionary approach, you're still going to be competing with everybody else along the way, because everybody else is going to take that same evolutionary approach. But look, if you start from scratch, you have nothing to lose at the end of the day, right? You can redefine what the space looks like. You can redefine how customers interact with your systems. You can redefine the processes. Look, processes today are still very cumbersome, right? I think if you really went back and figured out how you could redefine those processes, redefine the feedback mechanisms, right? That everything gets fed back in a loop that makes things smarter, makes things move faster, right? Just don't have those today in systems. You know, you have little bits and pieces, but it's very manual driven at the end of the day.
Okay. I think we could go on for hours and hours, which means we should do a sequel.
If you anytime, just let me know.
You can't get rid of us that easy, Bob.
Yeah. So thanks for everybody who is still in there, including Ralph. And, well, see you next week again. And we are going backstage now.